Namaste everyone and welcome to the live session conducted by PCGT National Youth Parliament. This session is going to be mainly focused on Indian polity and its features, its development, its history, its characteristics and much more. To talk about it, my name is Aditya Lele. I am a fourth year student of Government Law College, Mumbai, and I am also preparing for civil services exam for some time now. So I would be going through different prisms of Indian polity with the obvious guidance of the Indian Constitution. Those who want to immerse themselves in this session, I would request everyone to have a pen and a paper at their disposal, so that whatever points I am noting down, whatever points I am telling you, can be noted down by you in a very systematic manner. At any point of time, if there is any question or any technical barrier or any sound problem, then please do comment on that part of the video. We will definitely improve it because it's all about your experience and what you take from this session. So I will be obviously going on with my flow, but at any point of time, if you feel that there is an obstruction, some sound problem, internet problem, it's buffering and so on and so forth, just a minute. Yes, so that would be something I would be definitely, but the whole flow of the session will be in two parts. The first part where I will be unilaterally explaining you the Indian polity and features of Indian polity, and the second session would be a question and answer session, which will be of not more than 10 to 15 minutes. So I think that would be enough. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions to whatever I am explaining, please put your questions. So when I scroll up to your comments, I know what questions are going to be available for me to answer in the last 10 to 15 minutes. So we will start immediately. Okay. All right. I won't be entertaining any kind of questions which are very, very irrelevant to this session. It's a formal session. I think the people who are watching it, and I think the people who are going to note down and take notes from this session are serious enough to attend this session and not interrupt me in meanwhile. It does not look good. All right. So let's start. We will go to the constitutionalism of India and its features. Basically, every country or every nation state in its formation has a history of how it is formed and how it gained freedom and how it started its own governance. Now, these are two different things. Okay, gaining independence for colonial states, for the ones who were the imperial states, their formation and their governance is a very different thing, and their actually formation and their governance is a precedent to the colonial states like India and South Africa, etc., to form the governance structure and polity of their respective nations. So when I talk about nation state, or when I mention state here, I will definitely give you the context, because state is used in two terms. First state term is used in nation state or in international relations term. Second state is used in Indian term, which is state of Uttar Pradesh, state of Uttarakhand, state of Maharashtra, etc., etc. So we have to go into the history of how Indian polity was formed. It is not like at 1942 a British officer just woke up and said, oh, we have to give independence to India in next 5 to 7 years, so we have to form some constituent assembly. Then Cripps mission came, cabinet mission came, came, Mountbatten Plan came, India's partition, Constituent Assembly was formed before India's partition, and a lot of things. So we have to understand where the Indian Constitution or the concept of India's parliamentary democracy is coming from. It is not that we or Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar came with the idea overnight. There are so many precedents, so many constitutional steps and measures which colonial India went through before the formation of Indian Constitution itself. 1947 was the conclusion of a long process which started in 1773. 1773 there came something called Regulation Act. Now I am not going to describe all the acts from 1773 to 1947, but I'll give you the gist of how things came into picture. As we all know, we have to hop to some modern Indian history, which is in 16th and 17th century, where East India Company actually ruled India for a quite 100 years before British Crown took the control of the Raj, as we say. So the East India Company was not an administrative unit. It was a company, it was a trading unit, which for its monopoly in India wanted to have an administrative control. Before 1857, they did it with the help of different Rajas and Maharajas. Actually, not even before 1857, before 1762 to 1767, there was a battle of Plassey, and I am not going in there, but then they were not interested primarily in administrating the state of India, but due to the compulsions of Indian polity, then Indian polity, which was absolutely medieval and feudalistic, they had to set up a structure which could gain control on business. And what was the structure? The structure was around one simple thing, which was land. Land revenue was the single most important source of income for any Indian king or kingdom. So British India, East India Company felt that our control on land revenue was very necessary in order to control the Indian people or Indian territory, what they call as Diwani rights. Okay. Then from there to 1857 grew a discontent among the people against the East India Company, because East India Company grew more and more powerful. So powerful that the British Parliament felt a threat to its sovereignty by East India Company when East India Company did not give way to different requests of the British Parliament. So there was an apparent struggle between East India Company and the British Parliament. Till 1857, as we know, it was the first war of independence. There were many charter acts passed by British Parliament. Now, British Parliament had a indirect control over East India Company because it was registered in UK, and when you have a company registered on a sovereign land, the government of that sovereign land has a direct and indirect control over that company. But there were a series of charter acts from 1793, then 1813, 1833, 1853. So every 20 years a reformation came. But in 1857, when East India Company almost lost the control of the Indian territory, British Parliament said, no more, we are taking charge over, and monopoly of East India Company and then gained the British paramountcy over the Indian territory. So this is the first constitutional transaction between a commercial entity to a political entity in the Indian history. So East India is transferring all its power to the crown. Okay, so this is the first constitutional change which came into the history of Indian polity. There's a transfer between a commercial entity to a political entity. The first time a political entity came into the direct power of Indian people or Indian territory. From there it started Regulation and Charter Act khatam ho gaya, and then it started Government of India Act series. What is this Government of India Act series? Government of India Act 1957 was one. Then the famous ones are 1891 or 1893 is a famous one. 1909 is a very famous Government of India Act. It is called Monte Merlo Reforms or Minto Morley Reforms, whatever you want to say. Then 1919 is a Montego-Chelmsford reforms. 1935 is the Government of India Act, and 1947 is the Independence of India Act. Now what changed from this and how it was formed, I will tell you. I have to explain the structure of how Indian Parliament came into place. Indian Parliament started from what we call as Governor General's Council. Governor General's Council was created in 1773 by the Regulation Act, where the governor was assisted by 2 to 3 members for all the functions, legislative and executive. And the Supreme Court of India was formed in 1773 itself. 1784 reformed, it's called a Pitt's India Act. Then 1784 reformed a lot of things. But then Supreme Court had judicial functions, but again it had no independence as such. And the Governor General had its council who did all the legislative and administrative and executive work. Edit and cut it to 1861. This council was expanded to say 16 members. In 1891 it was expanded to 60 members. In 1909 it was expanded to more members. In 1909 to 1919 there came into place something called the Central Assembly or the Central Legislative Assembly of India. It was bicameral, like House of States and House of Commons. So the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha existed well before India's independence. It was called Central Legislative Assembly then. This is the same Central Legislative Assembly where Bhagat Singh and his companions threw bombs in. So that was a different, but just to give you a context of what this Central Assembly was, it existed way before the India's independence. Alright? Now, I'm sorry, I'll start it again. So there was a Lok Sabha and there was a Rajya Sabha, but it had very limited powers. There was something called official majority, which existed from 1860s. What is official and non-official majority and minority? Basically, official is a very soft way of saying non-Indian English people in a central legislative assembly. And this official majority minority existed in the Central Assembly till almost the independence of India and the Government of India Act. Now, this whole Indian parliamentary structure had, when I said that it was a bicameral legislature. Bicameral is 2 houses. Bicameral also signifies one more thing. The federal structure of any polity. Federal structure means 2 governments. One is a state or a provincial government and second is a central union government. So there existed a provisional government in India and a central union government in India, what was called as Viceroy's government, and what second was called Governor General's government. And there were a lot of provinces in India. There was a Bombay province, if you now know. Bombay province at some point of time was from Sindh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, and a lot of Maharashtra. There was a Madhya Bharat province. There was a United Provinces, now it's called Uttar Pradesh. Bengal was a huge province. It had a lot of administrative. So there were provinces, and these provincial representatives were called in the House of States in the central legislature. My point here to say is this is how India's legislature evolved, or India's constitutionalism evolved. India's judiciary was evolved right from the constitution, because India's judiciary does not have a very glorious past. India's judiciary before independence was by and far controlled by the British government. Appointments were made so that the Indian citizens would not have any substantial justice, so to say. India's executive evolution of India's executive is very interesting. Here, India's executive was not republic. Republic means head of government and head of state. In India before independence, head of government and head of state, because there was no state, there was only head of government, and that was the Viceroy of India. The Viceroy had a council of ministers on whose aid and advice he was working, just like the President of India, just with a major difference. The major difference was the Viceroy had a complete veto on any legislative and executive actions suggested by its Council of Ministers. So he was not just a mere rubber stamp, he was a very powerful authority placed very deliberately by the British government in the Indian government. So what changed with India's Independence Act and before was we had a Constituent Assembly. Now this demand of Constituent Assembly came right from 1939, Quit India movement, and Constituent Assembly was formed somewhere in 1946. And it worked till 1949 for 3 years, and it passed all the articles very in a unanimous manner, and thus was formed India's constitution. India gained its independence in 1947, but India's polity came into picture just in 1950, Republic Day of 26th January 1950. Now, one more thing I would like to tell you, this is the history of India's polity's evolution. Now we will go to the features of India's polity. When we talk about features of India's polity, we have to make sure that we bring into the picture now the Indian Constitution, up-to-date Indian Constitution, with all the amendments enacted by the Indian Parliament. We will not rely on India's Constitution which was in 1950 or 70. It's up-to-date India's Constitution as of now. But before this, I would like to tell you that India's Constitution has various sources. So if you want to study India's Constitution in depth, if you look around to the major democracies of the world, India has adopted a lot of things from these major democracies of the world. From USA, we have adopted the very strong concept of fundamental rights. From the UK, we have adopted the parliamentary system. Then from, just a minute, from Russia, we have adopted the fundamental duties. From the Irish Constitution, we have adopted the directive principles of state policies. From Canadian Constitution, we have adopted some features, that strong unitary government and a little weak state governments. From Germany's Weimar Constitution, we have adopted the emergency provisions. From Australia's Constitution, we have adopted a lot of significant provisions. From Japan's Constitution, we have adopted a lot of significant provisions. So these are all the cluster provisions from different good provisions which are also suitable for Indian polity and Indian society have been adopted in India's Constitution. One more very heavy influence in India's Constitution is an act which never came into picture was Government of India Act 1935. Government of India Act 1935 actually created a polity which we see right now. If you read Government of India Act 1935, it is actually a dicto copy of India's Constitution. But then what changed? A very major thing changed. India was given a dual sense of governance. President as a rubber stamp and Prime Minister as the real head of the government and not the head of the state. In the Government of India Act 1935, Viceroy was a single point of power in India's polity then. But unfortunately and fortunately, Government of India Act never came into functioning. So till 1947, when India's Independence Act was passed by the British Parliament, India was still governed by the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms and the Government of India Act 1919 and not by the Government of India Act 1935. We will go to different features of India's polity now. The first feature is India has a written constitution. Now you will say that any law, statutory law is always written. It's on paper. It's black and white. That is not true. A lot of constitutions of the world are not written. They are not in statutory form. They are not in a very condensed form, as to say. One of the prime example is the United Kingdom. You will be surprised. The mother of democracy does not have an Aadhaar card. So it does not have a written document. उनके पास कागज नहीं है to prove that yes, we have a democracy and we have a written constitution. Because one thing we have to notice here is that what do we call as a democracy? Do we call democracy only because they have a constitution, or do we call democracy by de facto provisions and working of the government? You will have to understand de facto is in fact and de jure is by law. So by law, though DPRK is the most democratic country in the world, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. That is the name of the country, but by in fact it's the most undemocratic country in the world. So UK's functioning, de facto functioning, is very democratic in nature. It has a parliament which has a very dynamic representation of its people. Being in UK's parliament, you will see the House of People have more than 600 to 700 members. Now compare UK's population with India's population, and India still has 445 members in the Indian parliament which are elected. So you have to recognize that de facto a written constitution does not mandate one country or nation state to be a democracy by itself. Alright, but then why do we have a written constitution? It was mandated that because no one had a lot of experience in governing the country, this book called the Constitution of India should be a guiding book and guiding principle, and constitution should be sovereign. Now, again, I will distinguish here between de facto and de jure. De facto, the constitution is the sovereign. De facto, the Indian parliament is also the sovereign. But de jure, who is the sovereign in India's polity? We the people. The people of India, the citizens of India are the real de jure sovereign of our country. The constitution is not paramount. What paramount in principle, not in fact, but in principle, what is paramount than the constitution? The people of India. Then comes the constitution. Then comes the legislature of the country and the judiciary and the executive. Conventionally, it is said that all the three bodies of the government should be equal, but in fact, the legislature is always superior. Superior to the legislature is also the executive. So, the hierarchy of India's polity will be the people, the constitution, the executive, legislature, unfortunately the judiciary, because here is something I will elaborate when it comes to the independent judiciary's point. So we are now done with the point of written judiciary, written constitution of India. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Written constitution of India is a point which we were talking about. So India has a written constitution, and because it has a written constitution, it is also a very flexible constitution, so to say. Now there are some parts of the constitution which are very flexible, and there are some parts of the constitution which are very rigid in nature, and this is our next feature of Indian constitution and Indian polity. I want everyone to note this article down when you go on the next point. This article is Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. This article is said to be the article which constitutionally amends or gives the legislature the power to amend the constitution itself. So there is a proviso in the Constitution of India which gives the power to a entity created by the constitution to amend the constitution. Alright. So and there is not a single type to amend India's constitution. Amendment is basically change. Amendments are of three kinds: addition, deletion and modification. So India's amendment has all these three features. There is no distinction between addition amendment, deletion amendment. That is not the distinction. What is the distinction? The distinction is between rigid amendments and flexible amendments. Rigid amendments of Indian Constitution are the amendments which need the most rigidest form of the constitutional amendment are the constitutional amendment which needs 2/3 of India's parliamentary majority and half states of India should give a consent to this constitutional amendment. This is the most rigid form of constitutional amendment suggested and given in Article 368. And which types of amendments are done by this two-third majority plus consensus of the 50% plus one states? These are the constitutional amendments which are done or which are federal in nature. Federal structure जो change करे, federal structure now when I say every time and any time in this next live when I say the federal structure of India, I mean the relation between the center and the state. I will give you a simple example. What is the best example of federal state or federal relation between center and state? The power of taxation. Power of taxation is power to levy tax and power to collect tax. So if there is a distinction, so if there is a constitutional amendment which just like GST or the goods and services tax, it is a constitutional amendment which requires two-third majority and half states should consent to this federal amendment. So this is the most rigid form of Indian constitution or Indian polity. Indian constitution can also be amended by a simple majority, which does not require two-thirds of majority in both of the houses, and it does not require any name or any say of the states government of India. This kind of amendment is regarding, for example, citizenship. Citizenship or any so citizenship is basically Article 1 to Article 11 of the Indian Constitution. So any change in Article 1 to Article 11 of the Constitution does not need two-thirds majority, does not need the consent of the state. So the point I am making here is basically how rigid Indian Constitution can be and how flexible Indian Constitution can be at times. So this is the second feature of Indian polity, that it is very rigid and it is at the same time very flexible, but it depends and it is very logical. So if there is a change, and this is very democratic structure, so to say, if the states are going to have a say on something, something like taxation, and their consent is not being taken into consideration, then what is the use of calling ourselves democratic? Because apparently the Union of India is formed by the state and the union territories and any territories to be acquired by India in the future. So these are the two permanent and one conditional provisions which form the territory and the polity called India as or India or what we say in Constitution, it is said that India or Bharat. So India or Bharat's polity is formed by union territories, state territories and any further territories to be captured by India. So the state consent is very necessary, it is very democratic, so to say, and that's why we are very rigid and very flexible at some point and flexible at some point. Then, from this point we will come on to the third point, that India is quasi-federal and quasi-unitary. India is not completely federal and India is not completely unitary. Now what is federal and what is unitary? Unitary is one single government, no provincial governments, no provincial lists of power. Now when I say lists of power, again write down something called the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. The 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution differentiates between the powers of the union and the state government and has a unique feature called the concurrent list, which gives the power to the state as well as the central government to legislate and enforce these subjects. So a unitary government or the unitary structure of the government does not have any distribution of powers between local governments and the central governments. Everything is legislated and decided by the central government, and there is no state or provincial governments. Federal unit is, or federal structure of the government is that states also have a major say in what and how the country is run. And the best example is the United States of America. Very strong states and a very strong union also. But UK is a unitary government. It does not have the province of Manchester, province of London or something like that. So to say, there is a federal unitary structure in India, and the point here, the fourth structure of Indian polity which we will be talking about, India is a parliamentary government. Now, you might say, democracies are parliamentary, right? Democracies are bound to be parliamentary. They should be parliamentary because democracy is a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. But that is not true. There are some governments which are called presidential democracies, and there are a lot of presidential democracies in the world too, as the parliamentary democracies. Now, parliamentary democracies is the unique contribution given by Greece or Greek states in the ancient European mythology. In the modern sense, they were started by United Kingdom. Presidential democracies are again democracies which elect a strong executive like the President of the United States of America and give him a lot of power. So why do we call a presidential democracy a democracy in the first place? If there is no representation in a plural form in a lawmaking, so that is not so. Presidential and parliamentary democracies can be differentiated in a simple form. Whether the executive, the real executive, is also the nominal executive of country or not. If a country answers this question in positive, then it's a presidential democracy. If a country answers this question in negative, it's a parliamentary democracy. The question I will again repeat for everyone: whether your real executive is also your nominal executive. What is real executive and what is nominal executive? Nominal executive in Indian sense is the President of India, who has to act on the advice of the Council of Ministers. This Council of Ministers is headed by the Prime Minister. This Prime Minister is the leader of either of the houses in the Indian Parliament, mostly the Lok Sabha. This Prime Minister is also an elected representative among the House of the People, sometimes nominated from the Rajya Sabha. He is from the legislative. So the legislature is following the executive, and this executive, real executive, is advising the executive under whose name all the actions are being taken. Now this is a little confusing, I understand this, but then I'll repeat this again. All the actions of the Union Government of India, the central government, are taken in the name of the President of India and not the Prime Minister of India. All the actions of the state government are taken in the name of Governor of the state and not the Chief Minister of the state. But are these decisions really taken by these two entities, Governor and the President? No. These two entities act on the advice, and the advice is binding on these executives. So why is there this distinction between who advises and who acts? This distinction is called the distinction between the nominal and the real executive. This distinction, if it exists, is a result of parliamentary democracy. And if this difference does not exist, and the real executive is also the nominal executive, or there is no nominal executive as such, and there is a real executive existing, that is called a presidential democracy. But India here is a parliamentary democracy. Next, we will move on to a very controversial topic in these days, is India's citizenship. Now, India has a single citizenship. India's citizenship, unlike a lot of other countries, is not a dual citizenship. There was, and when I am saying this, I am very happy to say that yes, India does not have a dual citizenship in any state. If I was saying this pre-5 August 2019, I would have to say that India does not have a dual citizenship with the exception of the state of Jammu and Kashmir. But now that the state of Jammu and Kashmir does not exist, and Article 370 and Article 35A does not exist and is not in place, India, with no exception, as a single citizenship in the place. So India's citizenship is single. There is no state citizenship. I cannot say that I am a citizen of Maharashtra also and I am a citizen of India also. I am citizen of India, that's it. But if I am citizen of Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Nepal, then there is a problem. Dual citizenship is not allowed in both the senses. If you are a citizen of some other country and also a citizen of India, then the citizenship of India is denied to you until you give up the citizenship of that country, and then the process of naturalization and everything which is specified in the Citizenship Act of 1955. But India's single citizenship means that state governments do not have any power in determining the subject of citizenship of a person. So if a person is to be determined citizen or non-citizen or whatever is to be done with the citizenship provisos of the country, it will be done by the Union Home Ministry and not the State Home Ministry. Even if the State Home Ministries act, the State Home Ministries will act on the advice of the Union Home Ministry. So Union Home Ministry is the body which calls shots on the citizenship. So India has a single citizenship. Now we will go on to the next topic, that India has an independent judiciary. Now this independent word is a very contextual word, and it cannot be used in a way anyone wants to use. Independent has three features. When I say independent judiciary, it has three features. The first feature is the appointment. The second feature is the salary and the pension. Third feature is the conduct, and I think fourth feature which I will add here is the impeachment or removal or retirement. These are the four features which qualify an institution as independent in this. Appointment is done by the President of India on the advice not of the Council of Ministers. This advice comes from judiciary itself. It is something called the collegium system. The collegium system is evolved from three cases: first judge's case, second judge's case, and the third judge's case. First judge's case somewhere happened before 1990s. Second judge's case happened in 1992. Third judge's case happened in 1998. So the independence and the appointment of judiciary is done by the Supreme Court of India. Also, Indian judiciary is an integrated judiciary. I will remind every one of you who is watching different series, United States of America based, Hollywood based series, where you always hear about federal court, federal laws and state laws. Federal court or the Supreme Court. Now in America, Supreme Court has a lot of jurisdiction, but it mainly has a jurisdiction on the federal laws of the United States of America, and there are state high courts and state Supreme Courts in different states. In India, it's not so. In India, states do have their high courts, and the limit and the territorial jurisdiction of high courts is limited to administrative, in the context of administrative territory, to the states. So, for example, the Bombay High Court is limited to the state of Goa, Maharashtra, and the Union Territory of Dadra Nagar Haveli. So it has benches in Nagpur and Aurangabad. So territorial wise, the state government territory is also the territory of High Court. That is fine, but it is not the court appointed and controlled by the state government. The High Court is controlled by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court controls itself. That's why it's called independent. So appointment-wise, the collegium is responsible in making the appointments of the judges of Supreme Court and the judges of High Court. Mind you, the High Court appoints a lot of judges in itself also, but if there is a transfer of the Chief Justices of High Courts from this Chief Justice to that Chief Justice, I'll remind you one case. Justice Mudaliar case, which happened right now when he was transferred from Delhi High Court to Punjab and Haryana High Court. This transfer was recommended by the Collegium of Supreme Court and implemented by the Law and Justice Department of the government, Union government, and not the state government. So, independent, integrated judiciary of India, मतलब appointments में independent. Second is salary. The salary of Supreme Court judges and the pensions of Supreme Court judges is directly drawn from the consolidated fund of India, and it cannot be altered other than in the case of financial emergency. Alright, the salary of the state High Court judges is from the consolidated fund of the state government or the state, and the pension is drawn from the consolidated fund of India. So this salary is a very important aspect of controlling an institution. If some other institution has a power to control, to modify the salaries of an institution, then the institution which has the power to determine the salaries of institution B is actually in the control of the functioning of the institution. I'll again explain this because I know it became a little confusing here. Institution A has a power to determine the salaries of the people in institution B. Therefore, institution A directly controls or indirectly controls institution B by this power to modify the salaries while the people in the institution B are in their tenure. So, for example, if Supreme Court judge is appointed and he starts giving judgments against the government of India, and the government of India, the Council of Ministers, the Cabinet and the Legislature, the legislature has the power, but if the executive has the power to diminish the salaries of this respective judge which I am talking about, then the executive will wield power on the Supreme Court judge, and the Supreme Court judge and the Supreme Court of India cannot be called as an independent institution. So the salaries are not determined by the executive; they are determined by the Constitution of India, and they cannot be, if someone is in term, with exception of the case of a financial emergency, only financial emergency, nothing else. They can be increased definitely, but decrease is something which cannot be done except in the case of financial emergency. The third sub point of independence we are coming is the conduct of Supreme Court judges. In legislature and in journalism, in media, you can definitely criticize the functioning of the Supreme Court and the decisions of the Supreme Court. Definitely, on the merits, one is complete at his liberty or equal liberty to criticize the functioning of the Supreme Court and the cases and the decisions given by the Supreme Court. However, a person is not at liberty to discuss and criticize the conduct of the judges of the Supreme Court. For example, the conduct is, and this is very elaborately discussed in many cases. I will be giving different cases and case laws to be read after I complete this. If conduct also means his credentials, conduct also means his credentials and his identity. You cannot criticize a judge and his judgments due to his identity. If a judge of this religion is giving his decision on personal law matter of some other religion, and if it's an adverse decision on the religion, for example, if for example, just for the sake of example, understand, if there is a judge of non-Hindu religion sitting on the bench to give a judgment on Sabrimala case, a person cannot criticize that judge that, oh, he was not a Hindu, that's why he gave an adverse decision. This is something called the criticism on the conduct of the judges. Credentials. Oh, he is from this institution. Of course, this institution is of a particular inclination. He will give a judgment of this inclination. This is not allowed because it hampers on the independence of judiciary. This is something which is not allowed as to preserve the independence of the judiciary. Fourth, impeachment. Impeachment of the High Court and Supreme Court judges is very, very difficult. It's just similar. It's not very similar, but it's a little similar to the impeachment of the President of United States of America. That one house is a prosecuting house, another house there is a trial, and there is someone who is presiding the whole case and stuff like that. So there is a very tenuous, very difficult, very elaborate impeachment procedures. Why so? Because this kind of impeachment procedures discourages haphazard dismissals, suspensions of judges who are giving adverse decisions to the government of India. If, for example, the Supreme Court is criticizing on the legislature and how lazy and whatever the legislature of a country or a state is, and the second day the legislature dismisses a Supreme Court or a High Court judge with a simple majority, then what will be the independence of the judiciary? There will be no independence to the judiciary, and that's why this impeachment procedure is a very arduous, tenuous procedure to discourage any kind of haphazard dismissals of the kind. Alright, we'll go on to some remaining features of Indian Constitution. It has been a long session for that matter, but then we will definitely try to stop the session after 9:30, 9:35, because 1 hour of this you listening, me talking is very intense already. Okay. Yes, this is something which we cannot ignore. And I'll just club these 3 points. It's not very beneficial to club these points, but then I will definitely club these points for everyone's benefit. The fundamental rights, the DPSP, and the fundamental duties. The fundamental rights is an idea taken from the American Constitution. Did fundamental rights exist in India before independence? Yes, there was a demand by Indian National Congress in its Lucknow session of 1929 that there should be a charter of constitution. There was a Nehru Constitution which was created by Motilal Nehru, the father of late Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. It was a challenge given by British government to India that if you are so capable of demanding a constitution, why not create it yourself? So Motilal Nehru actually created a constitution, and there are a lot of fundamental rights in this constitution also. So fundamental rights is an idea given by United States of America. It was inculcated in Indian Constitution with the same spirit as in United States of America. However, there was one provision which is very unique to Indian Constitution, is of the writs. Article 32 and Article 226 of the Indian Constitution gives High Courts and Supreme Courts duty, power and right to remedy the wrong of any action of the government. There are 5 kinds of writs. There is habeas corpus, mandamus, quo warranto, prohibition and certiorari. These 5 writs are exercised by the Supreme Court and the High Court. The Supreme Court has the power, limited power, to exercise these writs against any state body only. I think the state, and I might be wrong here, but the state is defined in Article 12 of the Indian Constitution and is being expanded to a lot of other bodies which are directly, indirectly funded by the state. So, the writ provisions of the Constitution are and can be used against any wrong or damage done by the government of any state or union or central government and local bodies also. But the power of High Courts to issue writs is more than the Supreme Court. The High Courts can also issue writs against private individuals. Mind you, private individuals can be also subject to writ or Article 226 of Constitutions, where Supreme Court can hear these writs, but only if it's in an appellate form. So, for example, there is a private contractor and he has breached my fundamental rights. It should not be a civil case. His actions have breached fundamental rights, my fundamental rights, and I have the power to go to the High Court even if he is not part of the state. Alright, and if this High Court gives an order and judgment and we are not satisfied with the judgment, then I can appeal to the Supreme Court, and this writ against a private individual can be heard in Supreme Court only if it's in a appellate form or if it goes into the appeal. So fundamental rights has three very important rights. All the rights are important, but 3 or 4 rights which are, again, I will be giving 4, 5, 6. I will be going like this. But then Article 14 is right to equality. 15 is again 15, 16, 17, 18 are right to equality. 17 May there is untouchability is abolished. Untouchability was a curse to India, abolished by a fundamental rights. 18 is already tax. 16 is public employment. 15 is against any legislation or state action. Article 19 and the sub-articles of Article 19 are against right to freedom. Article 20, 21, 22 deal with article right to life. Article 21 is basically right to life. Article 20 and 19 deal with right to freedom. Article 21A is right to education, by the way. 22 is again right to life. 23, 24 is right against exploitation. 25 to 29 is right to religion. There is minority institutions and so on and so forth. Right. Article 30 is non-existence. It has been shifted to Article 300A. It's a constitutional right to property, but since abolished. Article 30 or 31. It's 31. Sorry, it's not 30. It's 31. Article 32 is the writ provisions in Supreme Court, and Article 226 is the writ provisions of the High Court. So this is how the Part 3 of the Indian Constitution is given. Part 4 is the directive principles of state policies, which are non-justiciable, but they work as principles of guidance to the any legislature or to even till the local bodies. DPSPs are binding, non-binding, non-justiciable provisions as governing principles to even local bodies also. So even a Gram Panchayat can also, if there's a case in any case, it can show that okay, this is DPSP and our executive or Panchayat action is in accordance with the DPSP, and it will still hold ground in the court because DPSP is the guiding principle to the state. And now state, as I said, is defined in Article 12. It is from the President of India to even the local bodies and bodies which are directly, indirectly funded by the government, state, union. Now, fundamental duties. Fundamental duties was not part of the Indian Constitution. It was added by Article 42. It was added by the Constitutional Amendment 42nd, not Article 42. 42nd Constitutional Amendment when there was emergency in 1976. This happened. So 42nd Constitutional Amendment was the one which added fundamental duties. 42nd Constitutional Amendment is also called the mini constitution. It changed a lot of basic principles of Indian Constitution. Alright. Fundamental duties is a proviso taken from the Russian Constitution or the Russian government, that not just state has some, not only citizens have some rights against the state, but the citizens have also collateral duties to the state and the fellow citizens. So if you go by raw, legal principles or jurisprudence, rights and duties are collateral. My right is your duty not to breach my right. Is a simple give and take principle when it comes to rights and duties. I am not talking about Indian Constitution right now. My right to enjoy something is your right, your duty to let me enjoy that thing. Alright. So this collateral principles of rights and duties was balanced by the fundamental duties from the 42nd Constitutional Amendment. Now, this is the catch. The fundamental duties are non-justiciable and they are in a single article. Fundamental directive principles of state policies start somewhere in Article 34, 35 and they go till Article 50. Fundamental duties is Article 51A. That's it. 51A, 11 fundamental duties. I think there were 10 fundamental duties in the beginning. 11th was added later in fundamental duties. Alright. So these are the three very basic building blocks of Indian Constitution, that India's Constitution is giving you rights it is also placing some governing principles for the government, and it is also telling you that okay, even when you are enjoying rights, you have some collateral duties, though non-justiciable but important for judicial purposes and governance purposes. Alright, so this is the cluster of FRs, DPSP and FDs I had to explain. Now, India has an adult franchise, universal adult franchise, and this is very important. This was very revolutionary when this proviso was enacted. Universal adult franchise exists in Indian Constitution from its beginning, from 1950 itself. There are a lot of nations. What is a universal adult franchise? Everyone, irrespective of their gender, caste, sex, location, are eligible to vote if they are citizens of India, if their name is in electoral rolls, and if they are above the age of 18. Previously it was 21. It was lowered down to 18 by I think 68th constitutional amendment. I am not sure, but please go check. There is a constitutional amendment in this matter. So this was done by such amendments. Alright. It was 21 before, came down to 18. It was revolutionary because there were a lot of democratic, so-called developed modern countries in 1950 which had not given rights to women, to a certain race to vote. And there is one more provision which I told is your name should be in electoral rolls. It is very important. It is not notified anywhere. You say, if you are 18 and Indian citizen, you are eligible to vote. No. If you are 18, you are Indian citizen and your name is in the electoral rolls, only then. If your name is not in the electoral rolls, sorry sir, you are not eligible to vote. This is because that is your name in the electoral rolls is not a constitutional provision per se. Now remember this. It's not a constitutional provision. It's a statutory provision. So that is something you have to import. Representation of People's Act 1950 का है, 1951 का भी है. There is a proviso in that where your name has to be in electoral roll for you to be eligible to vote in any elections. Last point we are coming for the features of Indian polity is three-tier government. We have a three-tier government. Even if we are federal, we have a three-tier government. So to say. So namaste everyone, we were talking about the three-tier government system of Indian polity. I will wait for people to again join me for the live because there were a lot of, I think there is 1 hour limit on Instagram on how much lives you can hold and so on and so forth. Once we have the number of 20-25 people, we'll start again because I think we have done 1 hour chal raha tha, so I think it would be very prudent to stop this after and then question answer session. Okay, we have the adequate number of people now. I think we will start. Alright, so I was talking about the Panchayati Raj and municipal corporations. Did municipal corporations and Gram Panchayats exist before the coming of 73rd and 74th Amendment and the 11th and 12th schedules in the Indian Constitution? It did. But then what lacked? What it lacked was the constitutional status to the Panchayati Raj and municipal corporations. This constitutional status was given by 73rd and 74th Amendment to the Indian Constitution, which increased the schedules of Indian Constitution to 11th and 12th schedules, and in those 11th and 12th schedules, I don't have, I am not very well versed with what are the duties of all the Panchayat Raj and municipal bodies and so on and so forth, but I'll definitely read out some of the provisos of the local governments. But till then, I'll definitely, just a minute, 38. Yes, local government. So what are the powers of Panchayati Raj? Okay, 11th schedule, so to say. 11th schedule gives the power to agricultural, including agricultural extension, land improvement, minor irrigation, animal husbandry, fisheries, social forestry, minor forest produce, khadi and village, gram udyog, rural housing, drinking water, fuel fodder, roads, blah 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 blah. A lot of provisos and lot of powers to the Gram Panchayats, and all these powers are now in the 11th schedule of the constitution. So now it has become very important and very mandatory for Gram Panchayats to govern on these topics because they have become constitutional. And this was not an easy process. 73rd and 74th amendment to the constitution. So imagine how late this proviso came in the Indian context, so to say. Alright, so the different committees, and if you want, I will give you a list of committees which were researching or giving advices to the government of India that you should incorporate Panchayati Raj and municipal corporations into Indian constitutions. It started with Balwant Rai Committee, Ashok Mehta Committee, GVK Rao Committee, LM Singhvi Committee, Gadgil Committee, and finally in the Rajiv Gandhi's era, Rajiv Gandhi government's era, the 73rd and 74th amendment were taken into consideration. I'll elaborate a small thought on this Gram Panchayats. What are the features of incorporating them in constitution? They establish Gram Sabhas because village level administration is very important. Day-to-day administration of village level cannot be done by state government or secretaries and officers of the state government. You need someone from the village who understands the problems of the village cities in terms of municipal corporations and then takes actions and has the power to take actions. 73rd, 74th amendment gave these authorities the power to take actions, constitutional powers to take actions which can be challenged in the courts of this country. So these powers were basically, it's a three-tier government, as I said. The village, tehsil, district, elections were given, duration, disqualification, powers and functions, finances, very important. Any constitutional provision is a hollow promise without finances. So you have to always, when you debate around and go around, you have to always question the finances and the financial sources and the financial power of any entity. Alright, the State Finance Commission was given the duty to divide the state finances between the state government and the Panchayati Raj. The State Election Commission was given the duty to conduct the elections of the Panchayati Raj and so on and so forth. So this is something, and now I will give you the sources of, if you want to really delve into Indian polity. These are the sources, these are the authors actually. मैं सब books का नाम नहीं जानता. So just for your reference, these will be the books or the authors which I personally refer. One of them is D.D. Basu, Introduction to the Indian Constitution. Granville Austin, 2 to 3 books on Indian Constitution. There is one which it's a very academic book, so to say, M. Lakshmikant's Indian Polity. Then there's a handbook on Indian Constitution by P.B. Gajendra Gadkar. He's a Supreme Court Chief Justice of India. I'm sorry. Then you can always refer to the summary of the Constituent Assembly debates. There are books written by P.M. Bakshi, Brij Kishore Sharma, M. Hidayatullah, N. Srinivas, Sir Ivor Jennings, M.C. Chagala. Nani Palkhiwala is again a prominent writer on Indian polity issues. ये जो list है sources of Indian polity, I will tell the conveners of this PCGT to put this list on some Instagram story or post so everyone gets to know these authors. So I will now be taking questions, but again, हमारे last के questions तो चले गए. So if anyone remembers what the questions were, please put the questions here also. I'm so sorry guys, but I'll have to do a quick Q&A sessions for your doubt solving. Before that, I'll definitely speak about 2 things until you type out your questions. If you want to contact me personally, there's I'll type there's fair enough करके मेरा एक account है Instagram पे. So I am available there to answer your questions. This is my personal account. You can always, if you have any doubt, any doubt, you can always contact me on this personal account. That is all. So if you have any questions now, please do put it on comment section. I'll try to answer these questions. Please. So if there are no questions per se, we will be closing this live session. I do not have the access and the privilege to go to my previous live and check out the questions, because if I do that, I'll have to end this live also. So I think there are no questions coming from your side. So I'll be definitely. We'll do one thing. I'll watch the questions from the previous session, and I'll try to send answers on emails or some return form to the organizers, and they will publish the question and answers. Lockdown, no sir, I will take, because I don't know myself, I'll take questions relating to this session, Indian polity. Any questions and doubts on Indian constitution and Indian polity will be happily accepted, and I'll try my best to solve your problems. I am no hyper expert in this subject. I'm also a student in this subject, so I'll try to solve your doubts to my maximum capacity. All right. So I think with this, I'll request for the last time, if there are any questions, do post it on the comment section, and or we will definitely call it a day. It was a fantastic session. I enjoyed it immensely. I hope to see you in PCGT National Youth Parliament 2020, and I am chairing Maharashtra Vidhan Sabha or Maharashtra Legislative Assembly, and this session and this assembly will be discussing different models of farm loan waivers. It's just not discussing the agrarian distress in Maharashtra, but it's discussing a specific topic, which is farm loan waivers and different models of farm loan waivers. There are different models. I'll be giving a briefing on my personal session or PCGT if they thank you so much for joining in such a huge number. We will be meeting in PCGT's Youth Parliament. Stay safe, do not get out. It's a testing time for India and the world, and I hope to see you soon again. Thank you so much. Jai Hind.